Well, oh, hello everybody. Good to see you all, and also extremely good to be getting some good news out of the Pacific at long last. It's been rather disastrous out in the Pacific and east of Suez generally, but that's on two counts, of course. Yes, we have the significant US victory over the Japanese at Midway. But also, if I'd asked my younger self as I was sitting biting my nails in anticipation in the year 2010, I would have been waiting for the release of this game, Stephen Cunliffe's The Fires of Midway. Now, when this game was released, I already had one of Mr. Cunliffe's titles, the Hell of Stalingrad, which was a very interesting treatment of the battle for Stalingrad. It was very enjoyable, it was very imaginative, quite an interesting game system that he'd come up with. Very heavily card-based, but not... It was an odd sort of hybrid that sat somewhere between a card-based war game and a proper war game that was card-given, a CDG game, if you will. And I wasn't entirely sure what to make of it. I mean, I did enjoy it. I liked the Hell of Stalingrad, but there were also a bit, odd bits about it that made me think, oh, okay, yeah, I get it, I get it. The other thing about the Hell of Stalingrad was the really garish artwork. Now, I realize artwork is a hugely subjective thing, and depending on what your view of a particular battle or a campaign might be, you'd either look at it and think, oh, that's a bit frivolous, I don't know, or yeah, that kind of suits, even if it is in a slightly Commando comics sort of way. But I'm glad to say that for all the good points that attended the Hell of Stalingrad, my impressions when I finally got my hands on the Fires of Midway were even more positive. I like this game a great deal. As you can tell from the slightly battered condition of the box, this has travelled with me and it's been squashed a fair few times. And Mr. Cunliffe should take that as a compliment from me. I quite enjoy this game. I'll come straight out and say it might not be the best game on the Battle of Midway out there, but it's certainly a very entertaining and engaging one. And now's probably a very good time to say that this is not just, despite its title, about the Battle of Midway, because of course it is all about the carrier battles of 1942. And very much in the same vein as the Hell of Stalingrad, this is a game that's very heavily card-based. There is a map. They don't show it back here, but there is a map. And so it essentially is a sort of a hybrid war game. It sits in between those that are totally card-based and those that have a map and are card-driven. It's a very imaginative system. It's also one of those multi-tier games where you've actually got 2 or 3 different systems operating together. And if that sounds clunky, believe me, it's not. It actually works quite well in this game. But I will get more into the mechanics in the future videos. For now, let me content myself with the question of what do you get inside the box? Because like I say, we've seen some quite striking artwork, the familiar imagery of the Pacific War overlaid with these flames. I think that's a trademark of Mr. Cunliffe. Stalingrad had a lot of flames too, so not unnaturally Midway. I mean, it's called the Fires of Midway, so it would, wouldn't it? So let me rip this thing open and let's see what we get. Starting from the largest objects and moving down, of course, you get the indispensable rulebook and playbook, or flight manual, as he calls it. Really awesome. From a purely aesthetic point of view, I don't quite understand why this arrived in a perfectly serviceable but, black and white matte format, when the flight manual is this wonderful glossy thing that does full justice to the colour. Bit puzzled. It's by no means a game breaker in the slightest, but just made you wonder, really. So what do you get inside the rule book, or operations manual as it's termed? Well, you get very good historical write-up of the Carrier Battles of 42, along with Mr. Cunliffe's designer's notes. These are actually a really good read. He wears his heart on his sleeve when it comes to talking about his design decisions. And that's one of the things that has really helped me to like this game so much. There are things in it that make me raise my eyebrow, and people who want a more serious treatment of the Carrier Battles of 1942 might go, this isn't quite for me, but he makes no bones about where he's coming from and why he's done what he's done, and it all makes perfect sense. It's very well reasoned. I quite like that bit about it. You immediately get a load of scenarios, which is great. So as I say, it doesn't have to just be Midway. The game's rules are written on the assumption that you're going to want to jump straight into the Battle of Midway, but you don't have to. There is the Battle of the Coral Sea, for instance. You even, if you want a hypothetical scenario, get the rather abortive attempt to relieve Wake Island, which may have resulted in a carrier battle in December 1941, but of course it never happened because the US ships were recalled. So you get the advanced. I've just realized I've got this the wrong way around. Apologies, everyone. The flight manual is the basic rules. These are the ones you jump into if you just want to play the game, and they essentially teach you how to play the Battle of Midway. They are very well illustrated. Every single thing the rules discuss is beautifully drawn up and arranged for you to see. There are examples of play. And they always tell you're never left wondering what a component is, because you're always shown. And as I say, the basic rule book is gorgeous, and it takes you through the basic rules, gives you a very handy order of play at the back. This may seem a little bit wordy, but nothing is wasted here. There's no excess fluff. Everything you need to know is summarized very nicely here. The rules are clear, they make sense. I was playing this game within a day or two, having read the rules and the ops manual. I did want to jump straight into the optional and advanced rules. So anyway, getting over my own mental confusion about which rule book was which. Sorry about that. So you go straight into some interesting advanced rules that give you a bit more of a historical flavour. So they allow you to add B-17s for what good they'll do to the Midway campaign. You get optional uses for torpedo bombers. They can be re-equipped as conventional attack aircraft, level bombers, if you will. There are extra rules for the US Dauntless dive bombers. So, of course, the US Navy had that distinction between scout and bomber Dauntless squadrons. The advanced rules give the US player the option of re-equipping their squadron. So if you want to, if you're desperate, you can reduce the fuel load on your scout Dauntlesses and make them carry extra bombs. Or if the Japanese are quite distant and you feel you're fighting at a disadvantage because of the longer range of their aircraft, you can strip out some of the bomb load of your bomber squadron and give them a bit extra fuel and just have them carry a few less bombs. They're not going to hit as hard, but they've now got the range to do it. It's little things like that that add some nice tweaks to this. Importantly, for many wargamers, me included, there are solitaire rules included, and the solitaire system in this game is very well thought out. Other than that, there's just extra explanations and more details on what the different cards do and the components. It's a very handy reference. And finally, there's the option of linked campaign missions, so you don't have to play these battles in isolation. You can do them as part of a chain of battles. And on the very last page, there is this gorgeous, almost like it is a score sheet, basically. So as you suffer losses and damaged ships, you have to check them off as they go, which is depending on whether you're checking the enemy's ships off on your own, can either be incredibly thrilling or also or a tiny bit depressing. It depends. So much for the literature that comes in the game. What are the next big things you get? The map. Don't be surprised. A lot of these battles are happening somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, so unsurprisingly, you get a vast empty body of water with both sides starting locations. Where you play a scenario where islands are involved, like say for example Midway, that's the most obvious one. In the Midway scenario, there's a little counter representing Midway Island that starts in the center of the map. You also get weather elements like clouds or squalls that may appear on the map. They might move around, they might disappear. So this is effectively how you track the strategic side of the game, you know, where your fleets are, what the range is to the enemy fleet. Most of what you need to do in terms of scouting and spotting and movement of your task forces is all covered on this handy map. This is only A4 size, by the way, so it's very, very transportable. In addition to that, you have a few other things which may not be strictly necessary, but they're nice to have. So you've got the card for the discards, and I've already mentioned Mr. Cunliffe's games tend to be on the garish side. So rather than dead pile or losses pile or casualties pile, you get the watery grave for destroyed US and Japanese aircraft. Those of you, particularly Brits, who are watching this might wonder what the sod deck is, and I'm sorry for my bad language. I actually do call it the sod deck, especially if I draw a card that I didn't want or that was a poor result for me. That's the search or destroy deck, and the search or destroy cards, I'll show you those in a moment. They cover the search side. They also cover inflicting damage on the enemy and fuel consumption. They're an integral part of the game. They're quite important. And yes, you have a discard pile for them too. And lastly, again, as I say, none of this cardboard is strictly necessary, but it's very useful to have. Each player has their own control board. So you've got your victory point track, you've got a little reminder of what a lot of the icons mean, you've got a summary of the game turns with a link to the, or a reminder of where to find them in the rule book if you have a query. Draw deck, discard deck, couldn't be simpler. Very, very handy to have if you've got the space to lay them out on your table. And moving down in order of size, we also have ship cards. These are, I love these. They're very, very brilliant. I like the historic photographs that have been chosen for the ships. And I must admit, I do like the slightly loud colours that have been used for the dice and the rather dramatic way things are presented. So rather than something like, you know, you would say something like damage levels or hit levels or even flooding, loss of flotation. Oh no, we've got the undamaged side, we've got full strength, we've got cracked, and we've got ruptured bulkheads. And then when you flip the card over to its crippled side, it gets even more dramatic. So this is this game has extremely loud artwork, as you can see. The ship cards are pretty straightforward. Reminder of the victory points for when they're crippled. That's their damage threshold. So for each level of damage that the ship has, whether it's a fire, flooding, and so forth, the owning player at certain points in the turn has to roll. And the ship's survivability is based on a dice roll. On a 5 or 6, the Enterprise would suffer further damage and her tracker would move further along towards her crippled side. That's the number of dice she rolls for her anti-aircraft barrage, and that is the amount of damage she can potentially inflict if she scores a hit. And as you can see, there's also bits on the side reminding you what your allowable cap strength is and what the ship's action card might be if she plays one. So this is quite a visual game. You have your fleet, excuse me, you have your fleet laid out in front of you and you play your cards either side of them. Again, this kind of artwork may not be for everybody, but I find it in a weird Commando Comics sort of way, it gets you in the mood for this sort of thing. Aircraft cards, they are very much in the same vein. So these are standard card size, and the icons mean very much the same thing. So as with Enterprise, which we looked at just a moment ago, that's the number of dice the aircraft rolls to make its attack. That's the number of dice it rolls to inflict the damage. If you're wondering why the poor Wildcats don't get much of a look in, I think Mr. Cunliffe was factoring in the 20mm cannons the Zero enjoyed. That is your fuel allowance. So again, the poor old Wildcat's a bit short-legged next to its Japanese counterpart. But where it really shines is toughness. So whenever you, as you can see the bottom row here, that's the aircraft's toughness. Whenever you take a hit, your enemy rolls a dice. If you come up with a shield icon, it's no effect. If it's a bullet hole icon, they're flipped to their damaged side where their stats are weaker. And if you get these rather garish explosions, it means the aircraft is destroyed outright. So bit garish. I do like the aircraft artwork though. That is quite beautiful, but most importantly, the game information is very visually and very simply produced there for you. What else have we got? We've got the action cards, which both sides have. Again, get ready for more garishness. So you have, rather than staid, combat information center type titles, you've got very dramatic things like this US card, Hail of Death. So that icon means that it cancels the card played by the Japanese player that turn, gives the US aircraft one more dice roll to its attack and two more to its damage roll. That's nasty. Actually, come to think of it, I was just looking at the border. This is actually a card that's playable by a ship. So it's the classic US heavy anti-aircraft barrage. Here's an example of a Japanese card, Banking Shot, where you've pulled an absolute blinder of a maneuver and it gives you two more red cards. The action decks are brilliant. They're very thematic that way. What else do we have in here? Oh yes, we've got the aforementioned SOD cards or search or destroy cards. So when you're using these as search cards, you look at that corner of the card every time you blind draw one, and you'll either get low clouds or other weather features to place on the map. You'll get a ready cap option, which means your alert status has gone up. You'll sometimes spot a wake, which will allow you to draw a card because you're gathering clues as to the location of the enemy fleet. Enemy spotted allows you to draw 3 cards and is a major step towards finding and fixing the enemy fleet and winning the initiative. When they're not being used as search cards, this deck is drawn to track fuel consumption. As I said earlier, you might draw the card and get a headwind, which means you have to spend fuel. Or you might get closing fast, in which case you don't spend anything. Oh, look, there's enemy fleet for the spotting. And lastly, they serve a role as damage cards. So if you drew a card, depending on what attack you were making, that would be the dice roll you have to make. So let's say I was a dive bomber drawing that card against an enemy carrier. I would have to roll a 5 or a 6 to score a hit. 5 is a regular hit, 6 is a critical or CR. If I was a torpedo bomber making an attack, I would have to roll a 1 to score a meaningful hit. As with fighters, those shields mean no damage, you miss, it was an ineffective hit. So a really wonderful system. This card system is great. I really love this, where you combine 3 distinct functions into a single deck. That is so imaginative. And that is pretty much it. Aside from the counters are these beautiful chunky things. Same kind of very exuberant artwork. I mean, look at those damage counters. There's flames everywhere. There's spurting water on the flood counters. Aesthetically, this game is, everything's all in on that theme of lots of color, lots of comic booky levels of boom. And while it may not be everyone's cup of tea again, I think there's something faintly endearing. It speaks to my younger self and my love of Second World War comic books. And there is just one more thing in this game that I want to show you before I wrap this sort of what's in the box video up. Have anyone among you, and feel free to comment on this, do you guys remember a film called The Final Countdown, where a US nuclear carrier, the Nimitz in fact, gets transported through a kind of time warp back to December 1941, and they're almost weirdly given this chance to participate in the Pearl Harbor attack, basically, because they arrive, they soon figure out what's happened, and they have this opportunity to intervene. Well, the game plays on that in that you do get the USS Nimitz, and you can either intervene in the Pearl Harbor attack or you can be present at Midway in lieu of the US fleet. In lieu, mind, because it's horrendously unfair. Because not only do you get this super powerful carrier, but you get the incredibly capable aircraft that come with it. And trust me, if all I can say is, looking at the stats, I think the Tomcat has actually been downgraded just to give the Zero a pitifully fighting chance against it. Play this if you want to, it is fun, but as the designer himself said, it's only meant to be a bit of fun. It's not meant to be a competitive scenario. It's just a nod to fans of a very interesting and very great movie. So, right, I think that's it, actually. I have been through all the components that you get in the box for the Fires of Midway. So my next video is going to be a playthrough of a turn or two, but I'll make sure I take you through the full process of a turn and the preliminaries, because there is a search phase before the game proper begins. Just to give you a sense of how this game plays and what it's like. And I, for one, am quite looking forward to that, because this is far from being the most accurate simulation of carrier warfare out there. There are many, many games that do that very well. But it is a very unique design, and I hope you'll see what I mean when I come to doing the playthrough. But in the meantime, thank you very much indeed for watching. It's really great to see you guys, as always. Much appreciate your company. If you have any preliminary questions about the game that I haven't covered in this initial video, or that you feel I might, for whatever reason, not bring up in the coming videos, then please put them in. I'll try and answer them as soon as I can, that is. But otherwise, I really look forward to seeing you all in the playthrough. Take care till then. Bye.